And let's disable some of these layers, because while I want to project this concept onto the geometry, there are a lot of things such as the wires and the waterfalls that do not conform to the geometry in Clarice, so they'll kind of be ruining it, and I only want to use the things that will stick to what I have there in 3D. So let's disable a bunch of these, and let's disable the cables and the airships and the extra waterfall effects. And let's disable some of these layers, because while I want to project this concept onto the geometry, there are a lot of things such as the wires and the waterfalls that do not conform to the geometry in Clarice, so they'll kind of be ruining it, and I only want to use the things that will stick to what I have there in 3D. So let's disable a bunch of these, and let's disable the cables and the airships and the extra waterfall effects. And the waterfalls themselves, I think we can keep the background, as these will stick to the background geometry quite well at that distance, and it would be nice to see the effect of how much they are likely to move. So from the midground onwards, let's not use these just yet. Okay, so we have this image. Let's take it and save this out, and let's open up Clarice now. Alright, so now we're back in Clarice, and the first thing I'll want to do will be to add some animation to my render camera so that the camera moves through the 3D space over the course of a couple of seconds. So just for my example, I will use a timeline of 50 seconds and my shot will be 50 frames, and my shot will be 2 seconds long, and I will show all of the techniques that I'm using. If you would like to make your shots longer, it's up to you just to put in the extra work, because the longer you make your shot, the more work there is, but I will show you how to do everything that you need to do. So let's start off by taking our render camera, and let's just zoom in on it. And I am going to make a copy. And this one I will call ProjCam for projection camera. And let's say that will be our camera's position at frame 50, as it is now. So I'll want the camera to go from this direction into the image so that we can use whatever we painted in our concept as the projection at the end of the image, and we'll have to do some fix-up at the start. But instead, if we chose for the camera to move from a location behind where it currently is to a location in front, we'll have to do more overpainting on each side. Whereas now we can use this as one of the projections that will make up the entire image. So let's take our render cam and let's just click here and let's set a keyframe on the translation. Actually, sorry, let's go to frame 50 first, so our last frame, and we'll set a keyframe on the translation here. And then let's go to frame, let's do 1 instead. Here, let's set it to be from 1, so it's 1 to 50. Here, let's say we'll move the camera in the x-axis by 5. Oops. Set it to 5, and let's just set a keyframe. And so now our camera moves like this, and here we can see the difference that we will get in our render. So this will be the movement, and of course the things that we will have to put the most effort into will be things in the foreground, because they will be seen with more parallax, whereas as we get into the background we'll be able to get away with more and more, because the amount of parallax between the different 3D objects will be less. So we can take that and let's copy our projection cam, and we're going to call this projection cam frame 01. And let's just set the X translation to 5. So now we have a projection camera at the start and at the end of the sequence and of the camera movement. So let's use our ProjCam from frame 50 to create a projection of our concept that we just exported from Photoshop. So let's go into shaders and let's just create a new context, and we will call this DMP_projections. And here I'll make a new context again, and I'll call this one DMP base all. And here let's go to File, import texture streaming map file, and let's just pick up the image that we've just got out of Photoshop. And here let's just add a material editor, and we will create a new material matte, and we'll rename this DMP base all matte. Actually, let's make this lowercase as well as with my file, and we'll bring the image into our material editor, and we'll just plug it into the color of the matte. And here we'll go into the image's settings and change the projection mode to camera 3D, and object space will change to world. And let's scroll down to camera, and let's select our ProjCam frame 50. Okay, so now let's make a new render layer, and I'll just select our bottom one here and duplicate it, and we'll rename this DMP base all. And actually what we could do is we could copy this image and we could rename this image sequence, and let's make all of our animated render passes in this new image. So in the DMP base all, what I want to do is I want to use all the geometry, so I'm not going to change anything there, but I want to assign a new material. So I can just deselect this and click to override material, and I'll go into my DMP projections and DMP base all and select my matte material. And so now we can see our concept, and it is actually projected onto the geometry. So if I select something here, it's the actual object that is projected on. And if we scroll to frame 1, we can see the missing parts of our projection setup at the edges. So if we look here, everything is projected actually quite well. So obviously at frame 50, everything will be projected perfectly because we are projecting the image rendered from the same camera in the same spot, so everything matches up. But then if we scroll to a different point, things are now slightly askew. So we can see some duplications happening here as the camera reveals the part of the image behind these towers, for example. Here as well, here. And if we go to the very foreground, we see a lot of trouble here. So we can instantly see that here in the background, there is actually very little parallax. We're getting maybe just this much duplication, whereas closer to the camera, it becomes much more. So we can also illustrate this quite well by going to our texture and scrolling down our DMP base all texture and scrolling down to the U and the V repeat mode, and we can change this to reset and reset, and we can see how much of the edges our projection doesn't actually cover. here on the first frame, and we know that we will have to paint in new information in this black area. In addition, if we scroll back up and under the camera projection tab, we enable camera occlusion, we can now also see all of the black areas where, again, there is no information. So we can see that we will have to do a little bit of work here around these towers to fill in the matte painting behind them. But if we look further, we find that we are just getting maybe 1 or 2 pixels of distortion in a lot of these background areas, so they will not be as problematic. And you can see how here is just a little bit, and here it's more, and here it's a lot more. So for now, let me just change these settings back. And I'm going to make a quick render just to further discuss how much of this concept is still viable in our final moving sequence and how much will have to be changed. So in order to render out this as an image sequence, I changed the frame range of the render layer here from 1 to 50, and I can scroll to file output and click render to disk, select my format, and then I will go to save as, and let me just go into my renders folder, which I have made for storing all of these renders, and I'll go into, well, okay, I'll just do it out here for the sake of the example, but we will call this DMP underscore base underscore all, and we'll call this version 1, and we'll click full stop, hashtag for the frame numbers, because this will be rendered as a sequence. So all of these, so these 2 symbols will be changed to the frame number of the sequence, and .exr. And now let's go to Windows, Render Manager, and here we have our DMP base all selected, and all we have to do is click render. Oh, actually, sorry, first of all, completely forgot. We need to change our camera, make sure at least that our camera is set to render cam. Mine is, but in case yours has got a little bit lost, always make sure to check this before you render. And let's just click render. And I will now go into Nuke with this rendered out to discuss further how we will proceed with this sequence. So now we are in Nuke, and first things first, let's click R to read in our render sequence, and let's just paste my path to my render. And here, if you have sequences ticked, all of your rendered sequences will stick together. So let's select this one, and let's click H to enlarge it to our screen, and let's load the video. Okay, so this is what we have with this camera movement, and of course this is quite rough because none of our projections have been fixed yet, but this gives us a good idea of how much we'll have to fix in 3D, what kind of things we can get away with just our work in Photoshop, what things we might want to animate or completely remake. So let's zoom in a little bit, and if we ignore these areas sliding, which is the word we use when a projection is projected behind the object we wanted, and it is then sliding across the screen. So apart from these areas, this is all actually quite good. If we look here, and let me increase the brightness a little bit, it's actually not bad. All of this is sticking quite well, so we can already see some pretty good results just from this test projection, and we know exactly how much we can get away with. Here as well, if we look at things from this distance, we can see that there is almost no sliding on any of these areas except for here where there is a great separation of distance between things. So I think we are quite lucky here in that we will actually not have to do so much work. We'll have to fill in these edges, but over here I would say everything works quite well. Next up, let's look at our fog. So this fog is currently just projected with everything else, but it already works quite well. There is no weird sliding, it sticks to the geometry quite well, and you can't tell that it looks strange or anything like that. I think we will be able to get away with a lot. So for example, a problem we might have might be here, where we have a layer of fog projected from the 50th frame, but it cuts off at the bottom of the screen. So you might have to project this little bit of fog separately from the first frame, so it will be in the entire sequence. Other than that, I think we're looking quite good. So let's go back into Photoshop and let's split out all of our layers into the separate render layers that we will have and that we will use to then project separately and recombine back in Nuke later on.